You kept scaling this. Birchbox was growing quite quickly. In 2016, it was a tough year for the company. Could you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So right around the end of 2015, there was a lot of change externally in the market around the favorability for e-commerce. It's often led by public markets, and then private markets, access to capital changes.
Yeah.
We definitely saw that coming and realized that we had to operate the business in a way where we could become profitable fast so that we didn't rely on external capital to fund the business. And that made us take a hard look at how we were doing everything, all of the priorities we had in the business that were in parallel. And we decided we were going to have to cut down the amount of people that were working at Birchbox. We were going to have to simplify everything, reduce the amount of people in order to get to have more control of our own destiny. So we had 2 rounds of layoffs in a handful of months in between each other. And like even just thinking about it, it's a traumatic experience to have to shift from a mindset of like growth and giving people opportunity to, contract, reframe the priorities, reset the way we do business, and of course, like shrink the team, which is sad when you have a lot of talent that comes to work with you.
Was this 2016 in that time with the layoffs? Was that the hardest time you remember it being at Birchbox?
It was definitely the hardest at the time. I'd say the interesting thing about, I guess, life in general is that you go through an experience that seems like so hard and so insurmountable, and then you survive, and then those things seem like possible, doable, right? And then the next thing is like the new level of hard happens and you survive. And then, you realize you can do that. So at the time, yes, I'd say like that was the hardest. It definitely gave us a lot of perspective, but in retrospect, it was so necessary. And now it just feels like, if you're being really honest and realistic, every business that has ever endured decades of existence has gone through this, right? Just the ebbs and flow of external changes and then internally changes that you want to make. And it's really a part of running a business, and actually an important one, because it teaches you lessons that you can't really just intellectually learn without experiencing. So in retrospect, feels like it was a positive thing to have learned and to take with us forward as we think about creating something forever. But yeah, it's nothing you ever dream of doing, sure, as an entrepreneur.
Was there self-doubt in 2016 when you were going through this really tough time?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. There's a lot of self-loathing, right? You definitely take on so much of the blame for anything that isn't going right. I think as an entrepreneur, it can be characteristic, at least of many, and definitely of me, of you don't nearly celebrate the success as much, but every failure is dwelled on, so your fault. It's very hard to kind of equally distribute those emotions. The successes were everyone else, and the failures were just yours. So I think, yes, you really question your ability, and I think even that can be productive. I mean, I've always felt like the dream I've had for Birchbox is I still see how much potential, we have as a company. And I've always felt like the dream is that it is a company that realizes its potential.
Yeah.
And that I want to be the kind of leader that understands the kind of leadership this company needs to do that. That it isn't about me or, what is it for me? It's about what does Birchbox need and how can I be a part of that, and even think about who else should be a part of that.
What were some of the distinct steps you remember that you took to rebound the company that kind of turned it around?
We looked at every area of cost. A big part that we focused on was logistics and fulfillment of the product, and how do we simplify and make changes to that experience that made it a lot more cost effective to fulfill the subscription monthly boxes. That was the biggest cost savings initiative. We also just looked at the priorities of the company and really said there have to be fewer things that we're trying to do at once. We have to think more linearly versus this horizontal kind of like a lot of things can happen and we do a little bit of a lot of things. How do we like make big changes and move the needle in a big way on something together or on a few big things? So slimming down like what everyone's mind, the number of things that are taking up people's mind was a really big part of it.